Michigan absolutely curb stomped your Nittany Lions. And I don't think I'm being too harsh as I say that. Michigan rushed for 418 yards. And we knew that this was an offense that was going to be predicated around the run. I think we've seen the writing on the wall in the last couple of games. And my thought process, and I believe yours was too, is that at some point, JJ McCarthy has to be able to drop back and slice and dice the defense with his arm. This wasn't the game for it. And we have talked about this, and I'd like to dive into this with you just to kind of hear your thought process on it. I
Mhm.
believe that Penn State has made a concerted effort to recruit the profile of players it takes to match up with Ohio State and on a national scale with Alabama, what Tennessee's doing right now with their pass game, with some of those schools. And Michigan is not that. I think Michigan has gone the opposite way, where they said, if you're going to put out a 225-pound linebacker and your defensive tackles are going to weigh in at 290 pounds, we're just going to run it down your freaking throat all day long. And that's what happened to Penn State. Certainly, they were exposed by that. And it's troubling because I don't believe this is the first time against really good competition that Penn State has, quite frankly, looked like a fraud.
Yeah, I mean, um, so to kind of piggyback off that point, since 2016, James Franklin's been 0-10 against AP top 10 teams since basically they beat Ohio State and made the Rose Bowl run.
Yep.
That's a tough pill to swallow, especially considering that year you did win the Big Ten and you basically had a chance to do what Michigan is now doing.
Yep.
In terms of taking that momentum, carrying it into the offseason and turning into a real contender in the Big Ten East. You were the first ones to do it outside of Ohio State, and you kind of gave that opportunity up, right? And that's frustrating as a player, as a guy who kind of went there during the dark years and
Yeah.
wore that. It's frustrating, right?
But you know what? You did a hell of a job during the dark years. I got to give you credit.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. That guy, look at this guy. But with that being said, you expect the next step to happen, right? And that evolution hasn't happened. And to your point, I think they did recruit, but I think that there's obviously a lack of physicality.
There's some flaws to it.
I think it's more of a mentality. I'm not even going to say a physicality. I think it's more of a mentality, the type of person you recruit. Because at the end of the day, if you're Michigan, man, and I think Penn State's one of those special places where that mentality is kind of carried over. It's a very blue collar, hard nosed, like us against the world type of mentality. And I'm not going to call these kids out. Like I'm sure plenty of them have it, but it just didn't look like it on Saturday. And that's kind of I'm going to piggyback off into that point. Like I don't think Penn State played to the best of their capabilities, but I don't want to take anything away from Michigan at all, because at the end of the day, if you come down and run for 418 yards against a program like that, who recruits with you, competes with you for the same players all day in, day out, that is a massive step forward for your program in terms of comparison with a Penn State. Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, studs. Michigan controlled the football for 45 minutes or 41 minutes compared to Penn State's 18 minutes. Like it was a flat out like just ass whooping. You can't cover it any other way, and you don't expect that from a veteran team on offense with Sean Clifford and just like I said, the way Penn State's been, they're almost aged differently than Michigan, and you would expect them to have showed up a little bit better. And it's just you can't make any more excuses, and it's time to really start doing some evaluation if you're Penn State and the direction you want to head, because again, it's it to me it just doesn't show any signs of getting any better.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I don't think this is about the kids. Like we're not going to make this an indictment on the players on the field, because
Right.
they're put in the position that they're put in, and they got to go out there and play, whether it's advantageous for them or not. And a lot of those guys, I know personally, I know you do as well. And those guys are football players. Like they are guys who want to go out there and get wins. I just think as an overall philosophy for this program, it's fallen short, because yeah, you can play Ohio State tight and you can play them tough, and they've done that many years, but you have to at some point be able to say, okay, we're going to get big when the team wants to get big on us, and we're going to get the stops. And I'm not exactly sure that we've seen that. This, to me, though, is not all about Penn State and their shortcomings. I think a lot of this is about Michigan and where they've done well as a program. And I want to be clear about this. Michigan had the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line last year, best offensive line in college football. I think this offensive line might be better than what they had a year ago. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. I'm saying that because what we've seen on the field has been dominant. They have 2 running backs who can really play. They've got a tight end group that is phenomenal. They got some wide receivers out there who maybe aren't getting the looks that they want. Those guys can be game breakers at any moment.
Ronnie Bell's a difference maker. He is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a quarterback who hasn't fully been unleashed, in my personal opinion.
Because he hasn't had to be, to your point.
He hasn't had to be. Mm-hmm. And I thought McCarthy missed a couple of throws, but he's a young quarterback, so I don't hold that against him. You flip it defensively for Michigan. I mean, this was a team that had Dax Hill, who's a first-round pick, and they had Aiden Hutchinson, his second overall. David Ojabo would have been a first-round pick had he not gotten hurt at his pro day. Mm-hmm. And this defensive line, in my personal opinion, is better. And you can look at the stats to back this up. They're outpacing sacks at this point than what Michigan had a year ago because they got a bunch of guys with no names who are going out there just they know they have to make plays. And the secondary, to me as well, has really held up with a new defensive coordinator. They got new offensive coordinators too.
Yeah.
I think Jim Harbaugh, if it weren't for Brett Bielema and what he's doing at Illinois, would be the coach of the year in the Big Ten.